Welcome everyone. I have the great privilege of talking today about the topic of data sovereignty on a broad level. I think this is something that's very topical. Let me introduce myself first. I an advisor and previously ran a venture fund which focuses on primary focus is on where technology driven disruption is having an impact on primarily asset heavy industries and other applications, and where how that creates opportunities and challenges for companies and investors. Today's topic really is at the core of that, and one of the things where I think AI is hugely topical at the moment. But I think what most people don't really realize is that to grow, AI is going to have two primary constraints. One is energy, and that's the obvious one. But I think data access is the critical one. It's the one that doesn't normally get spoken about. The public internet has been consumed by the AI engines out there, but getting access to data in a trusted way is going to inhibit AI's growth in the future. And I think today's conversation with Rick and Laura is going to be specifically interesting, both from a national sovereign perspective as well as a company sovereign perspective. Rick, maybe you want to introduce your company and yourselves.
Thank you, Brendan. Yes, my name's Rick Gilchrist. I'm the founder and CEO of Vannadium. We started in 2021 with the idea of establishing data sovereignty for both enterprise and consumer. The goal being beachheading across multiple industries for not only owning the data that's being generated, but ensuring that that data is free from threat actor, bad actor, and usable for both utility and monetization across multiple streams. The heavy aspect of this really is around AI and putting guardrails around AI while maintaining a higher level of security and understanding where that data is coming from and whether or not it's credible, and trusting that data for use in everything from the training purposes as well as the business inputs for businesses to properly take advantage of AI to make better informed decisions. So the technology really spans across multiple aspects of what we've developed and utilizing blockchain in a way most companies never thought possible. And that's all based upon a core technology called diffusion. That diffusion technology allows us to basically solve for the scalability issues within blockchain, moving transactions globally in under 1.1 milliseconds, increasing the security, reducing the amount of energy for those Web3 and AI transactions, while making it more affordable as well. It seems kind of like a pipe dream, but we've got patents behind all of this that show that this is truly something that can be adoptable by enterprise and government across the board. And it's this technology that allowed us to be one of the first companies to stream and store data directly on blockchain, no cloud, no hard drive, no local storage, but streaming directly to blockchain and being able to recall that data and all underneath that 1.1 millisecond as well. So it's something that's very, very unique that can be applied across multiple industries, the least of which is with AI. And Laura herself has an absolutely incredible background in blockchain and the movement of the stored value, which she brings an amazing collective thought process on both the customer development and the product development in what we've developed. Laura, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Happy to be here. I think the topic is so important, and foundationally, we know that digital infrastructure has become really the foundation for a lot of these AI decisions and for businesses, right? One of the things that we've been speaking about a lot recently is we were just over at CES and kind of a lot of different areas talking about AI infrastructure. if you have issues with your data, whether that's human error or fraud or just missing data, you could get by and build a multi-billion-dollar business in the past. You'd be okay. You can kind of paper those things over. When you add AI into the mix, you're really taking any errors that you have and scaling them. You're making them move faster. You're making them get bigger. You're potentially making them catastrophic. Because we're beyond what humans are doing at this point, and we're moving faster than humans are moving. So you really can't catch that when the AI is moving faster than humans are. So we really want to have those guardrails for AI decision making, not just in the training data, but really on the company side. The company data that's going into those decisions is really where we're seeing a lot of the risk. The training data, a lot of people have taken a look at that to make sure that things are going okay. People are really not taking a look at their data on the company side. A lot of people.
I think this is interesting because there was I'm old enough to be able to remember when they were saying junk in, junk out in terms of data spaces and cleaning your data when you put that into a database years ago. But with AI, you're actually you're just, as you said, you're escalating exponentially the errors that come out of data. And your point is very important, I think, is because when you train, there's so much effort goes into ensuring that the data is clean and it's correct. But increasingly, AI is being asked to look at pseudo or even real-time data, and then it's essential to have the credibility and the trust that the data that's coming in is not only in the right format and has the right nomenclature, so you know what the data is and the quality of the data is, but also that you can rely on it.
Well, we've also disintermediated it, right? Like the data that's going into a knowledge base for AI is not coming from your CIO or from your data team. It's coming from, Jan in accounting and like Bob in like the mailroom. Like it could be from anywhere. And
it's also coming from sensors, right? Which
sure,
could stream directly in.
Yeah. So end users have massive control over what's going into these systems. And they could be sharing anything. You can have a policy about what you share, but really having guardrails around that so that everyone is protected and safe is super important.
Well, trusting source and origin are absolutely, required here. So when you can put this into a blockchain and be able to access that in those, 0.08 to 1.1 milliseconds, so it is real time. It is conversational as well, but then grading the source and origin, knowing that data is coming from a hardware device versus a human input. Who was that human input from? Is this from a look back, or is this from real-time data that's streaming from data that's being originated? And now when business decision is being made, you have a credibility rating behind why the decision is being made in this manner. Knowing that it's coming from hardware, you're going to have almost 100% credibility on something like that. And then also knowing that hardware was when it was last serviced, when there may have been consumable parts in there that may not be measuring correctly, all the way down to that human input of a PDF that may have not been read properly by the OCR. So all of those things give a more credible rating to the source and origin of everything being used. It's also guaranteeing that somebody else isn't inserting a poison pill, inserting bad data, because it's not going into that blockchain because of how it is permissioned. So everything has a proof of value across that entire data supply chain going forward.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting for me when I looked at what you do is, the fact that you're using blockchain. I think data sovereignty means different things to different people. If you look at from a geopolitical perspective, nations, regions look at sovereignty as keeping their data in a certain geography and keeping control of that, and the privacy and other rights and elements around that. Within companies, that has a very different view. And the concept of a data space, for example, I noticed that you're using the blockchain as a core technology to you, and not so much with the data space technology and frameworks that are out there. Do you have some idea as to how that works? Because what I see is blockchains are good and are being used for things like traceability and, as you say, but when you go beyond organizations into an ecosystem, in asset heavy industries like mining or in energy, then you need to also be able to share data potentially across multiple organizations. How do you see that impacting?
That's a great question. And first of all, you have to understand that we're not some kind of rip and replace system. Our technology is an interoperability layer. It wraps around what's already there. It also allows us to join and see data in different areas without having to throw it all into a data lake. So in real time, we can query that data that's being pulled out of 50 to thousands of different sources, pulling that and tokenizing that in real time, querying all of that data, sharing it permissively from one area to another without any kind of commingling of data or accessibility or permission side of those things. So we built a technology that allows us to use both Web 2 and legacy technology with Web 3, so we can have disparate systems talk to each other. And that's not unidirectional. It is actually bidirectional. So when we're looking at this larger tokenized data that we're evaluating or we're analyzing or having AI look at, it is always being updated in real time as well. And then the results of that are then shared. For example, we have a partner that is collecting multiple data streams across a drone. Now, some of that data is going directly to an atmospheric organization. Another one is going directly to an energy management. Other pieces of data are surveillance. That data is going only to the organization that should be getting that data. There's no possibility of intermingling or somebody getting that data that shouldn't be able to. And this what allows us the ability to ensure that data handling is more secure and better managed. And again, that part is also auditable. We know who initiated it, who touched it, who looked at it, who downloaded it on both ends of that. And the technology we developed has a comm system built into it that can utilize everything from Slack and Google to Zoom or whatever messaging or file transfer system is required. We're just the bridge between the front end and the back end.
And I think that
What's interesting to me is when you say auditable, increasingly I believe that certainly AI applications and other industries are going to need, as I said, access to non-public data sources and information. And one of the things that if you can do the auditing and the control and the trust layer sufficiently well, it also means that this can be implemented or used to implement a kind of a monetization or incentive scheme as well, where you can remunerate people for providing their data in an open and auditable way, which again forces trust on the economic side.
That's right. And I mean, essentially, that is where AI is going to have to go next, right? It's running out of public data. And so we're going to need increasingly private data sources to be permissioned directly to LLMs, but also to be able to give information to each other. The benefit of a blockchain solution for that is that at the end of a license agreement, you can actually revoke your data without any residue. The person just doesn't have it anymore. Because with a system like ours, we're not talking about a reference to the data being on chain, we're talking about the data itself. So for the first time, it's terabytes of data directly on chain, not megabytes. You could actually stream this data on chain in terms of the recall speeds. So there's no cloud involved, there's no local device involved. In terms of some of those geographic restrictions that you were talking about, you can just make it so that the nodes never go into a denied area or never leave your country. So that data sovereignty piece becomes, moves from a dream to a reality pretty quickly. And it means that you really can monetize that data. And that could be individual users, it could be organizations or countries, or it could be some incentive scheme that everybody has agreed to where the revenue is shared appropriately.
And Brendan, what's really interesting is that we talk about the idea of blockchain, data sovereignty, tokenized assets, world assets that are also being used and moved across the chain itself. But at this point, now organizations can prove they own that data, even if they're sharing it. No different than if I hand you my passport, it doesn't make it your passport. It's mine. It says it's mine. I still get to have that back. It is tagged to me. But now businesses can do the same thing, knowing that their data is owned by them. And when they're ready to no longer share that, they revoke it, just like Laura said.
Yeah, see, I'm seeing, before this session went live, I mentioned I'm speaking in February at the Data Space Annual Symposium. And a lot of the topic there is also on this this topic of data sovereignty. And the way that I see this is that, there is I would almost call it idealistic, but certainly the sovereign data aspect, which is going across multiple industries for things like regulation and traceability. In the EU, there's the Data Protection Act. There is for automobile, there's Cortina X, and there's various other initiatives like the battery passport for EVs, et cetera, et cetera. And those are more horizontal cross industries. But talking to industry experts and executives at companies, they see the technology as being beneficial to themselves, irrespective of, let's say, the idealistic political, geopolitical environment. And I think, the technology is not new. Blockchain has been around for a long time. But what I think is really interesting is that it's organizational and businesses that are now starting to catch up to and really understand the opportunity that the technology brings, even though the technology has been there a long time. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about some of the organizational or business changes you're seeing, because this is technologies that's existed.
Yeah, I'm gonna lead in with this and have Laura comment because she's been directly on the front lines of this. When you look at like the healthcare industry, healthcare really wanted to adopt AI and they wanted to be able to utilize blockchain as well. Blockchain is still expensive. You're using public chains, private chains, hybrid, federated chains per transaction. It can be really costly when you're running it off of, HPC. You've got that to contend with on top of that. And then they see this kind of light at the end of the tunnel of, we've got a company that's going to supply us with an AI. We're going to have our scribing done. We'll throw it over our current systems, not realizing that, well, they just all of a sudden became no longer HIPAA compliant. They didn't know where their data was going, that it went out of country, that even their scribing AI was sending it somewhere else to be processed. And this is actually a real life case study where a very large healthcare organization in the US, their data was going to Canada. They had no clue it was going to Canada and coming back down and being reintegrated. In addition to, when you throw this over a data lake and you're hoping that advanced directory is going to help you out with permissioning, and it doesn't because these systems aren't talking to each other properly. Now you've got Jan in HR that sees patient data, and you've got to see a practitioner seeing somebody's compensation from HR. And that's obviously extremely problematic. Now, they're not all that bad, but when you have healthcare rolling out 20 or 30 different pilots to see how they can optimize and use AI to better suit what they're doing, not technically for ROI as most enterprises look at, it becomes something that is practically criminal when you look at how that data is being handled and who's getting access to it. And this isn't a breach. This isn't somebody ransoming their data. This is something they're doing to themselves. At the same time, that same healthcare system, they're paying ransomware daily. They're, these smaller ones like the tribal and community systems, not even just the bigger ones. They're paying $1 million in ransom a day. Now, imagine if you had something like the Vannadium technology deployed across all of their systems. Well, all that data is now on blockchain. It's not on a cloud. There's not an endpoint for some hacker to try to go after. And if they go ahead and try to access all of that data across, 500, 600, 800,000 nodes, they're still not going to be able to reconstitute the file, number one. And two, their data is still going to be there. So if they get everything off their cloud or the local prem or whatever it is to try to ransom it, well, it gets restored in about a millisecond, and they have continuity of operations. And that's just two small examples in the healthcare space alone. Laura?
I think the conversation really has changed. You have these innovation cycles, right? Where people tend to think, okay, let's try the new thing. And the conversations about blockchain in business maybe 5 years ago were, okay, let's maybe try this new thing. Technology wasn't there yet. It was not scalable enough. It was not fast enough. It was not energy efficient or cheap enough for anybody to use it for direct storage of data. So the most that anyone was able to do is really store a reference to the data. The data itself still lived on the cloud somewhere or on-prem. You really were just putting this kind of extra reference so that you had this kind of tag that you could follow. I think now that we have the ability to put the data directly on chain and to go past the cloud and past on-prem storage, you can still do it in a hybrid environment, right? You can put certain amount of your information directly on chain or just the backups directly on chain. But what that means is that you can, for the first time, have blockchain in a real-time environment. You could have, for the healthcare example, someone doing surgery half a world away from the robot and be able to put the streaming information for that surgery directly on chain with no lag. So that in a malpractice situation or defending actions later, you would actually have the entire video stream directly on chain with provenance and know what happened, not with just timestamps, but with something that you could take to court and say, no, nothing happened here. This was okay. You know, it's a whole new environment and a whole new business case when it's directly on chain. I think that that's a really big leap forward. I mean, I use the word leap on purpose here. The product is called Leap, but like it really is a big deal to be able to have that real-time streaming. I mean, some of the conversations that we've had in media and content and being able to permission content and keep track of the original content that you put on chain means that deepfakes and people changing your quotes, people changing pictures after the fact, all of that would show up. That's where blockchain really shines. That's what blockchain does in its sleep, is show the truth for what has happened along the way. And it's a one-way stream, right? If I try to edit something, it's not making an edit to the original. It's making an edit downstream and saying, hey, this person.
Absolutely. I think that's something. And I think what you mentioned about, the risk of litigation and the fact that this is auditable and can be proved brings me to the next point. And I think, what would you say to boards about the importance of this from not only a risk perspective, but a capital allocation perspective as well, in terms of how this is not just a cost, let's say, to avoid some form of risk, although that is true, and comment on that too if you like, but in terms of their capital allocation, because I see, for example, in critical minerals applications for this, where you can accelerate import-export procedures by having the data in a data space or a blockchain or whatever the case may be, where you can, and this is going to be increasingly required in multiple governments to be able to show where the origin of the materials that are being imported and where they were processed, etc. Could you give me some? What would you say to boards who are listening to this or follow this afterwards to say, this is why you need to pay attention to it, not only from a risk perspective, but from a capital allocation from the benefit side?
I'd say it's not an option anymore. The reality is that we're moving to DLT or distributed ledger technology either way. They need that audit trail. And you look at our own administration here in the US, by 2030, you're going to have every company that wants to do business with the government having to utilize that. It's a compliance issue, it's a governance issue, and it is a brand and reputational risk issue on top of that. There's a reason why news outlets are looking at something like this to say, we need to combat fake news or the perception that we are using fake news. It's the same thing with annual reporting. Large corporation, publicly traded companies. It is going to get worse before it gets better. And the question is, are you going to adopt the technology that's going to impact CapEx and OpEx right now? Or are you going to be forced to accept the technology that you don't know how to use and cannot integrate properly into your organization?
And I think like carrots and sticks, right? Like we talk about the fear and the risk a lot with people because it's a big problem. But then, as you said, there's also a massive opportunity for revenue streams and, increased revenue from your data, from being able to permission that appropriately, from being able to share it appropriately. So there's both sides of that.
Yeah, I see this, from my own conversations on the topic. If you look, for example, the automotive industry in Europe, for example, where there's been some initiatives taken on data sovereignty using data space technology. The industry is now being forced to adopt data sovereignty as part of their regulatory environment. But the ones who took the first movers are now showing actually real benefit from the technology, and the others are seeing it as a cost. And there's some leverage in that. And I think there are several industries, which are seeing exactly the same thing. I think while data sovereignty originally might have been a political initiative, it's fast being adopted by companies. And I think the acceleration innovation will happen at the company level. And ultimately, there'll be some catch up on the political level. At least that's the way I'm seeing it. I don't know how you see that yourselves.
No, Brendan, you're spot on. And with the digital passport itself and having chain of custody of all that data, a framework like the LTM blockchain, it is the exact fit for that. If a company's already on that passport is a non-issue because you have that audit trail. You've got the ability to track every piece of data, where it was, where it came from, everything as it relates to the data coming in and out of those systems. And, we talked to a lot of organizations at CES in Europe. How are you preparing for this? Well, we know we have to. Well, how can you prove that your data is where it says it is? And one company said, we have 11 different servers and they all waterfall together and we get this. I said, well, what happens if a bad actor's in there or somebody internally to your organization is manipulating data, or you've got a supplier that has its own backdoor into this and you are a supply chain company? Well, we didn't think of that.
Well, I think that I know we're running out of time, so I don't know, but I think you're absolutely right. I think this is fascinating. I think we could probably talk for another hour or two on this topic, and I'd love to have another follow-on conversation. But I think this is definitely going to be at board level conversations going forward. And I think, as you said, the proactive players will take advantage and turn this into a business opportunity, and the others will see it as a cost because they'll be forced to implement.
And for us, this is a really good juxtaposition of having pent-up demand and growing as a company. We did a lot of the stuff right, behind closed doors for several years until we could protect this pretty strong IP, valuable across both horizontals and verticals. But now we're growing through all of that. We're halfway through a seed round ourselves. So, we're looking at very good strategic investors that we're bringing on before we hit our Series A, in Q3 of this year. And we're looking at, thought leaders within these industries to be first adopters of the new technologies.
Well, thank you for your time. I think it's been a very interesting conversation. I really think what you've got is very interesting, and I definitely, I see a huge potential for this space in many industries, because this is one of those things I think is going to have an impact across the board in different applications potentially, but in every industry eventually this will become core technology, in my opinion.
Thank you, Brenna.
Yeah, thank you. We're biased, but we agree.
Well, yeah, I think that this will be forced on people whether they will like it or not ultimately. So very nice to speak to you, and thank you for your time, everybody. I think This is a great topic. It's very topical today, I think. Certainly as supply chains get changed regularly, and as industries need to adapt. I think this sort of technology enables those ecosystems to monetize and control their data, which is becoming almost as important as the products they ship. Thank you for your time.